Hi, welcome to my channel. This is a story set in the time of Diocletian, the Roman emperor responsible for the greatest persecution of Christians. It tells of a happily pagan merchant living a comfortable life until fate changes himself and his world. This is a Christian story which I hope touches your heart. It's the story of the pagan. Julius reclined in his couch at the dinner table, savoring the grapes of his afternoon snack. Business had been good this morning, with potions flowing into his shop from the far reaches of the empire. He remembered previous years in the chaos before Diocletian restored order. Years when he'd barely paid his bill, even a few where he'd sold slaves. But now all was well. His alchemical lotions arrived from the far corners of the empire, and he'd been able to purchase estates in Cisalpine Gaul and Illyria. Julius turned to the statue of Mercury in the corner of his office and gave a silent prayer of thanks for his fortune, the blessing of a proper wife and obedient children, and asking good health for the emperor who made it all possible. May the gods smile on Diocletian. He smiled as Lucius, his most trusted servant, appeared at the door, the underling's gray hair and wrinkled olive face, always a welcome sight. John Diocletian requests an audience. An old friend, though sometimes a troublesome one. Julius remembered the days of their rivalry, two young merchants competing to bring mystic potions to Rome, while they vied for the hand of the fair Lucilla. That had been when John was tactless, wily and aggressive at every turn, though both conducted business with the honor of Romans. By the gods, what a man Tactus had been before he turned sheep. I'll be happy to see him. Perhaps we can have lunch together tomorrow, Julius said. He is here now, Lucius said, and he is agitated, saying this is urgent. That sounded far too like John. He'd always been a man who let his emotions rule him, not accepting the wisdom of Marcus Aurelius with his injunction to face life calmly, reasonably, nor was he willing to partake of the soothing elixirs which calmed the mind. The drive that had made Tactus so successful, now it just made him annoying with his odd focus on living a life based on love rather than reason. Likely a byproduct of his odd belief system. The belief system that had convinced him to sell all and leave the trades when his career bore fruit. John's choice appeared fortunate during the years of chaos, but with order restored, the man sat far from the table of prosperity where Julius died. However, during the hard times, John gave without thought of reimbursement, cheerfully helping when a fallen tree damaged Lucius's atrium during the lean years caused by the bedlam of Carus, and the succession of emperors who came and went like the leaves captured by the winds. He had sent food during a lean time. When others avoided the down-on-the-luck merchant, John had supported him and never begrudged a favor to Julius. So they'd become the best of friends, former enemies. Perhaps this was an opportunity to return a favor, as his honor demanded. Show him in. John rushed in, standing between Julius and Mercury, and said, "Thank you for seeing me. I'm in a desperate position." Julius would never adjust to John's wildness, the long, unkempt hair and beard framing his face in silver and black. The once white toga, now faded gray, bounced off John's gaunt, wrinkled body. Truly the years had worn hard on his old friend, who had the hands of a laborer, reminding the merchant to schedule a manicure and a revitalizing bath. Julius gestured to a couch next to him and said, "Come, sit with me and share some of my fruit and wine." John sat but did not recline, perched upright on the couch, positioning himself between Julius and Mercury. I do not mean to be ungrateful, but I have little time. I fall under Diocletian's writ. Julius sat up straight. Was he harboring a criminal? What problem had John brought him today? He asked, what writ is that? Diocletian has issued a writ against Christians, demanding we abandon our faith. This persecution places my family in danger. Persecution was an ugly word for what was going on. True, Diocletian had pronounced the odd religion illegal, and for good reason. These Christians spouted much nonsense and refused to respect the other gods. All knew their disrespect brought bad fortune, but the emperor had gone beyond this, though there were rumors of others going further in the provinces. But here in Rome? Surely you jest, Julius said. Diocletian announced a ban on bishops in the city. It is only a matter of time before I'm arrested, and I worry that they will punish my family as well. That could change things. It seemed out of character for the wise emperor to act punitively, but the bureaucracy moved with the speed of a napping tortoise. That is worrisome, Julius said, but I'm sure there is time. Bishops Peter and Timothy have already been seized, John said. Soon they will come for me. I can accept that, but I worry about Lucilla and the children. Could you help them? Julius popped a grape in his mouth, pondering the situation. John had 7 children. These Christophiles truly reproduced like hares. The eldest could work, as could Lucilla, so there could be a place for them at his estate near Rete, 15 leagues away. But if Diocletian was serious about this, Rete may be too close. If Diocletian truly intended eliminating the Christians, Julius could only interfere with that at his own peril. The emperor had no tolerance for disobedience. Only Hannos, the god of honor and justice, knew if the emperor was serious about extermination. Julius guessed he wasn't. But was this the gamble he wanted to take? He remembered Lucilla's youthful beauty with a pang of regret. Her smooth skin, beckoning brown eyes, and gift for song had captivated Julius as a young man. But then Fortuna, goddess of luck, had taken her from him. It was Lucilla who had turned Tacitus to Christ after he convinced her father of his magnificent prospects and wed her. The old man Theseus had all but torn up his house when he learned his new son-in-law had given away the dowry and all his other possessions. At the same time, Julius took on many of John's former clients, including Theseus. Of course, he would have succeeded regardless. Blood told in these things. But it's hard to deny that losing Lucilla was a victory for him. Now John would place her under his care. She no longer tempted him, but what effect would her strange religion have on his servants? Time had eroded her physical attractions, but she still sung with Venus's voice, and her words turned Tacitus's head toward nonsense. I cannot bear to see Lucilla and my children in the arena or nailed to a cross, John said. John, have you thought this through? Are you sure you aren't overreacting? I know Diocletian finds your religion distasteful, as have many of our emperors, but this rarely translates into action. This time is different. He has listened to the rumors and believes we must be purged from the empire. Julius frowned. He was certain the rumors of rampant orgies and child sacrifice were false. But there might be something to the notion that the Christians angered Romans' gods with their vehement denials of their existence. After all, what were gods but men writ large? And what man wouldn't boil with rage if told he didn't exist? Then why don't you convert, Julius said, or at least pretend to? Rome's gods bring her glory. They demand our respect. John stood, his face flushed, showing that emotion Julius distrusted, before taking a breath. I cannot do this. It would be a sin before God to bow to your wooden and stone deities. We both know our gods are not in the statues, Julius said. The statues are just representations to focus worship, much like your image of Jesus on the cross. The two are nothing alike, aren't they? They are not. Ours is a depiction of Jesus' ultimate sacrifice, reminding us of his gift of salvation, pointing us towards redemption. There is no such message in your idols. Such a stupid argument. The man sought a favor, but cannot resist arguing theology while ignoring the practical. Our gods teach us to be Romans, Julius said. They remind us of the importance of tradition, rituals that come down through the ages, connecting us with our ancestors. John held up his hand. I did not come here to argue. I cannot worship gods I do not believe in. Can you protect my family? Julius preferred not to accept the burden, but he could not turn from their friendship. Arguments aside, he valued John. The bishop had his peculiarities, but he was an honorable man who would protect Julius's family were the positions reversed, though the likelihood of that ever coming to be was infinitesimal. Diocletian was a powerful emperor, a man of conviction. If he decided the Christians needed to be removed from Rome, this would happen and he would not flinch from bloodshed. His honor and friendship left Julius with no choice. My friend, I could take your whole family and settle them on my estate, you included. Why don't you go with them? John bowed his head. That is not God's plan for me. He demands that those who enter his service as bishops worship courageously, accepting punishment no matter how unjust, suffering as Jesus suffered. I will not attempt to escape fate. Then your God thirsts for the blood of Christians. It was his blood. What? Jesus shed his blood for our forgiveness. What Christ hungers for is our hearts. Julius reached for the wine, considering the fate of his friend. Would the praetor enforce the sentence in the gladiator pits, by crucifixion, or with imprisonment? I see no purpose in your death. We have known each other for many years. I do not believe you should be a martyr. I am not a martyr. If I die, that will not be why. If I die, it will be for God's glory, and I trust that I will be rewarded in heaven. There was that strange belief in heaven. You are nothing, then you live, and you're nothing again. This was the way of the world. Julius was a Roman and understood glory in his bones. This promise of heaven must be part of John's God's capriciousness, in that way similar to Julius's gods, who helped or didn't by no rules anyone understood. Regardless of what the priest said, hard work and good blood took a man far, but fate still did what it did, and there was no arguing with it. It had been fate which had allowed John to marry Lucilla and convert 10 years ago. Could this have been Julius? Could Lucilla have turned him away from tradition? No, Julius did not allow his wife, Elena, to rule his life this way. He had made it clear to her from the start that he oversaw the important things while she raised the children and managed the household. During the first years of their marriage, he made it clear to her that he would seek comfort and offspring elsewhere if she turned the shrew on him. And so she kept quiet, as a good wife should. Thank Venus for the gift of a dutiful wife who knew her place. He'd mused on this long enough. There was no choice to be made here. I will hide your family on my Gallic estate. How soon can they be ready? Tomorrow morning. Very well, I will do this. John leaned down, kissing Julius's ring, a gesture of subjugation which felt uncomfortable from a friend. Thank you. This means more to me than I can say. I pray all the best for you and your family, and that God will work on your heart, leading you into our love. If it be God's will that I die, I will die with a prayer for you on my lips." Julius flushed, watching the bishop run away as he thought of what he must do this afternoon. And for today, business would wait. He would arrange transport for the wife and children. This would not be a secret, as they would disguise the trip as a vacation, allowing officials the opportunity to turn a blind eye. And he was sure they would, with a little coin contributing to their poor vision. The next part would be done sub rosa. It would not do for Rome to realize he'd kidnapped a Christian bishop and shipped him to Gaul. One slip and he would be caught, earning Diocletian's considerable ire. But such was the price of Roman honor. "What do you mean you didn't get him?" Julius had even reached into his limited stockpile of sleep drafts, so there shouldn't have been any issue. And he'd used soldiers on leave to assure maximum professionalism. Why had Fortuna abandoned him? The young Nubian soldier shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, he keeps himself inside his church, surrounded by his congregation. It wasn't a good risk." The Christian churches were nothing more than private homes. So there were what? 20 unarmed sheep? Couldn't you have cut through them? "Sir, you wanted this done quietly. I'd be happy to kill them, but that wouldn't go unnoticed." Yes, and it would upset the soft-hearted John. Come to that, Julius didn't want a slaughter on his hands. The soldier stood straight as a Roman wall, uncomfortable in his failure. Julius waited for him to relax, filling a cup of wine to show he appreciated the earlier work escorting Lucilla and the children. Any idea how to lure him out? "None at all, sir. I sent a man posing as a potential convert. It took a few hours, but John wouldn't leave." A canny move. The Roman emperor was arresting Rome's few dozen bishops, not its few thousand Christians. But he couldn't stay in there forever. What to do? "Do you still have the drought?" "Sir, yes, sir." "Very well. Show me to this church, then hide in the shadows. I'll get John out, and you ambush him. Bring your 3 colleagues in case we have to deal with a few supporters." This might make a scene, but Fortuna owed him a break. The church gave John the urge to hold his nose. This should be a house for a single family. Even from the outside he could tell it was filled. 3 women dressed in rags with matted black hair and robes at least 30 years old stood outside, watching for traffic, waiting for soldiers. Nothing for it but to push forward and be grateful for an otherwise empty street. "I am here to see Bishop John," Julius said, projecting his voice. The tallest one shushed him. "Be quiet, unless you have come here to arrest us all." "I come here as a friend who has news of his family." "What news? Tell us what you know." John emerged from the house. "Grace, do not worry. This is my friend Julius, and I trust him. What news have you?" Julius pointedly looked around. His soldiers hid around the corner at the intersection 3 houses away. "John, I have taken a grave risk for you. Come with me and let us speak in private." "Do not trust him," said Grace. John motioned for silence. "I trust Julius, and also trust my flock. What do you have to say?" This was careless of John, but what was Julius to do? Nothing guaranteed that there weren't spies here. Inspiration struck. "I know who took them, and I need you to come with me to reason with him. He is of your faith and believes he is doing them a service." "The man who took them?" The story filled itself as Julius spoke. "He goes by the name of Matthew, and some of my people saw him leave. We have no time to waste." "Don't believe him," Grace said. John patted her hand. "I trust Julius." Julius led them on a trot around the corner where they met 12 Roman soldiers, none of which were Julius's men. After 2 weeks, Julius was ready to scream. If he heard one more lecture from John about trusting the Lord, he'd hit him and keep hitting until the bishop stopped talking. Julius saw no response to their situation other than fury, and he wouldn't accept his friend's tranquility. Guards, I'm a Roman citizen and deserve a trial. At least get me away from this maniac. The laughter of the other prisoners did nothing to improve his mood. Shut your mouth, said the guard, a well-fed younger man with blond hair, whose most distinguished feature was his whip. I might just take on your sentence myself if you don't stop your whining. Are you in such a rush to die? I did nothing. I'm not a cultist. You can't hold a Roman citizen for doing nothing. The guard replied with a crack of his whip, stinging Julius's arm. My friend, John said, sit down. If you want me to be quiet for a few minutes, I can do that. But I have to proclaim the good news. The good news? The good news? You're a raving lunatic to think there's any good news in this. John placed his hand on Julius's shoulder, which Julius promptly pushed off. With a sigh, he said, the good news is that even when you are at your lowest, Christ is here for you. His love, his forgiveness, his salvation are always there, waiting for you to open your mouth and drink of his blessings. In this world, we live at the mercy of men who are venal, bathed in sin. Jesus offers perfection, which I just have to die to receive. Sounds like the darkest con in the book, and you, Tacitus, should recognize this. In life, he will grant you balm as well, if you will but open your heart to him. Julius pushed John away, throwing him into their cell wall. Fool, stop your preaching. I've heard what you have to say. That was when 3 guards came into the cell. One pointed a sword at Julius's throat, while the other 2 seized John. It is time for your justice, hater of gods. Yes, it is, Julius said as he walked away, glancing briefly over his shoulder. Bless you, Julius. May you find your peace. May... A guard punched the bishop in the stomach as another hit him on top of the head with the flat of a sword. He is a citizen too, Julius said. The emperor will be displeased with you. The guards laughed as they dragged John away. Within an hour, he had a new cellmate, a thief named Atticus. Atticus spoke little, certainly not delving into theology, and this did absolutely nothing to soften Julius's anger. His anger turned, focusing on John's God. He spat upon Christ. The days went by, cellmates came and went, but Julius stayed. The other prisoners were far beneath him in station, and he disdained conversation. What interest had he in the problems of the poor? After another week, he began praying. First, he reached out to Honus, praying that he would receive justice as a Roman should. He prayed out loud, and the other prisoners guffawed, so he prayed silently for 2 days. When that didn't work, he turned to his patron god, Mercury. He'd been generous with his sacrifices. Surely Mercury would pay attention, but another day went by without response. So one day he prayed to Jupiter, the next to Mars, the next to Venus, and so on for 2 months, turning to a different god each day. Cellmates came and went, each receiving whispered warnings he was a madman, and maybe he was, for his prayers did nothing for him. His gods had abandoned him. So after 60 days, Julius howled curses at all of them. The next day, the guards came for him. 2 jailers, invulnerable behind their leather vests and active whips, hauled him to see Praetor and Paulus, the judge responsible for the Christian cases. The praetor sat behind his chair in toga rather than military attire, watching expectantly as the guard shoved Julius into a kneeling position before his desk, striking him a third time. "Kneel before justice and plead for mercy, atheist swine." The pain stabbed Julius. The strikes cut into his thighs, and torn skin cried for one of 17 bombs in his warehouse. "Please, I'm innocent." And Paulus bore a look of pure disdain. "That is not what I hear. First we find you in the company of a gods-hating Christian. Then we hear you cursing the names of the gods." "I didn't mean it. I'd prayed for some." "Coward. We also have the testimony of your wife that you are a leader of Christians. Your bishop went to the pits proudly, but you do not have even that. You are a disgrace to Rome, and you surely anger our deities." The room whirled in Julius's mind. Elena had betrayed him. Why would she tell such a lie? She'd always been dutiful, but her silence had hidden something other than loyalty. Or perhaps she simply saw an opportunity to take the business, which would fall to Dominicus, who was 10 and under her control. How could their marriage have meant so little to her? But his marriage wasn't important now. What was important was that he had been a law-abiding citizen, a man of means, who'd always honored the gods. "Honored praetor, I speak only the truth. I believe in our gods. Would I curse them if I did not? Anger possessed me. You've kept me here so many days." Crack! A whip bit into his back, tearing the tunic beneath his blades. "Dare you question Praetor and Paulus?" A second crack bit his back as he whimpered, "No, I didn't mean." "It is as I suspected," said Paulus. "The Christian's blasphemy infects you, taking your manhood. Guards, take him outside and give him 20 lashes. Then return him to his cell." They hauled Julius to a post, tied him there, pulling down his tunic before beginning the punishment. He thought himself too numb to feel. What has a man whose family has turned on him? But he was wrong. Pain penetrated that fog as he cried out with each strike, the pain almost drowning the laughter of the guard. When Julius returned to his cell, he huddled in a corner. Perhaps losing Lucilla hadn't been so fortunate after all. That was nonsense. Lucilla's husband had already passed into nothingness. Most of all, he wondered what god he should turn to. Now he knew. There was no Mercury, no Onus. How could any god exist in a world such as this? All that remained for him was death. Soon they would cast another prisoner into his cell. When that happened, he would rise, strike at the guards, forcing them to end his hollow existence. Julius was ready when the men came in, springing at the leftmost guard and grabbing for the whip. He was no match for the jailer, who cast him off with scarcely an effort, laughing as he lashed Julius's face. "Do not hurt him," said the new prisoner, a bald, gray-bearded man dressed in a tattered black tunic, with each tear showing a scar on the old man's body. Both guards turned on the new prisoner, who collapsed to his knees and bowed his head as they struck him, clasping his hands together and saying, "Lord, have mercy," while tears mixed with blood on his body. After a few strikes, he pitched forward, unconscious. The guard struck the old man again on the way out of the cell. Why had the fool intervened? Julius might have had his death had it not been for the meddling. It would serve him right if he died. But the bleeding stained the fragments of black left on him, and Julius sighed. The old fool meant well. He just didn't understand yet. There was little left to work with, but Julius tore off pieces of sheet and placed these over the other's wounds to stop the blood flow. These were greeted with groans as the man's eyes blinked open into a grimace. Julius knew how he felt. "Why did you stop them?" Julius said. "You were God's child. I could not let you suffer unnecessarily." "There are no gods, or if there are, they are demons seeking to torture us." "Other gods may be demons. I do not know this, but Christ." Of course they threw a Christian in with him. Julius said, "Christ is the worst of all, a God who tells you nothing but lies, speaking of the glory of the weak, taking everything from them. You do not understand. Let me tell you the good news." "I have no need for your fatuous good news. I have known one of your bishops and seen it kill him." The old man pulled himself into a sitting position. "Now you've known too. I'm Bishop Thaddeus. Which of the martyrs did you know?" Every day, every moment was worse than the one before. I was friend with Tacitus, the man who became Bishop John. If it were not for your Christ, he and I would both be wealthy merchants. Thaddeus bowed his head. Blessed be his soul. John died wealthier than you can imagine. Julius stood and walked to the corner of the wall, curling himself up into a ball and covering his ears. After a moment, a beard scraped his right shoulder. Two hands grabbed his right wrist, and the worst breath he had ever smelled reached him. "I will not preach at you," Thaddeus said, "but think about this. No matter how much you may believe you hate God now, he loves you, as he loves all. I know this is hard for you to accept, but his love is always there for you, always ready to lift you, as I'm sure it did John at the end. Just remember that for all its trouble, all its stupidity, all its cruelty, God loves this world. God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, to the end that all believed in him shall not perish, but shall have everlasting life." Thaddeus backed away. "I will be happy to speak when you are ready." But Julius recognized a bad sales pitch when he heard it, so he was never ready to talk. And 3 days later, the guards came and took Thaddeus. But what if there was a God who loved him? What if his pains were nothing beside the joys which awaited him? Perhaps nothing he had done so far truly mattered. But then, why would he matter? Julius had never realized there were levels of loneliness. Now he descended into a depth of darkness which didn't blink. No longer did he concern himself with cellmates or conversation or food or water. He remained in his corner, unmoving in his crawl toward death. He did not resist when, a week after Thaddeus died, the guards took Julius to the praetor. "I hear you are not eating," Impaulus said, "and I think it may be time to release you." Release him to what? After his wife and children abandoned him, his jail required no cell. "If you would but sign this paper, you will be free." The paper read, "I confess to being a Christian bishop who plotted with the other bishops to sully the sacred rites, desecrating shrines with acts of defecation, and planning to murder the emperor, Rome's God on earth." From there it listed specific acts of perversion that would have shamed Nero. John stared at the page, going over word after word, finding their meaning so strange as to be unfathomable. "Surely this is a simple thing for you. If, as you say, you are not a Christian, why not sign it and be free?" "Well, why not?" Julius leaned over and picked up the pen. Then he remembered. John helping rebuild his house, part of a pattern of giving and friendship throughout the last half of his life. Images of John torn apart in the Colosseum as Julius's own family abandoned him appeared. Thaddeus's few words of a loving God surfaced as the tiniest piece of a sunbeam penetrated his heart. He closed his eyes, reached toward their God for the first time, and his heart filled. He dropped the pen. No, don't be a fool. Freedom awaits you. Julius stepped back, meeting Apollos' gaze. Not that way. Then you are a Christian? Julius nodded, though he had little idea what that meant. He only knew that there was a lightness in his heart and a feeling of comfort that held him despite his realization of what a flawed man he was. Truly, he deserved nothing less than torment. Tears welled up in him, tears of sorrow for his coldness to all which he should have loved, tears of joy for the warmth of his now filled heart. The whips cracked, an endless series of lashes that did not end until a golden light came and arms embraced him. Breath left him with life itself as he flew past the sky to where his old friend awaited him. Bless you. May your decisions lead you to a life where old friends share their grace with you. God bless.